In this episode, we'll answer the following questions. What are the real-life events that inspired Black Christmas? Is Halloween a sequel? What convinced Olivia Hussey to sign on to a small horror film in Canada? All this and more, in no particular order, so you have to keep watching. Alright, so the juiciest of details first, just because I like you guys. Famously, the movie takes into account the urban legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs. A story told from babysitter to babysitter, beginning in the 50s. My first encounter with that urban legend was in the movie When a Stranger Calls. I can't remember the rest of that movie, I was only 8 when it came out. But I remember that opening scene with Carol Kane and the goosebumps that broke out all over my body, quite distinctly. Its other inspiration was the Westmount murder. In November of 1943, George Webster, at the age of 14, beat his mother to death with a baseball bat, and then attempted to murder other members of his family, without success. Even with World War II going on, the murder made the news, and I feel like today that news might be relegated to the little ticker tape bit at the bottom of your screen. Back then, in a quiet neighborhood, it made quite an impact on popular culture. We're still talking about it today. I've read that the vampire rapist might also be the inspiration, and the names they give these guys, could we not, seems like a slight form of glorification. Wayne Bowden was a serial killer in Montreal that killed 5 people between 1969 and 1971. Nick Manusco, one of the voices of Billy, the Prowler from Black Christmas, has mentioned that the inspiration did indeed originate with the 1943 murder in Westmount, Montreal. So until someone else says more, that inspiration has been narrowed down. This is a tough one to tackle, subject-wise as well as in context of the movie. The movie has a subplot revolving around an unwanted pregnancy, and the decision by our main character to have an abortion. The Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, which, unfortunately, is back in the news again, was decided in 1973. Black Christmas came out in 1974. It's hard not to look at this movie and think the plotline was intentional. And spoiler here, so skip forward a few if you haven't seen it. Making the boyfriend the villain was also intentional. Sure, he was innocent of any actual harm to her, other than the psychological damage he was beginning to inflict, that is. He's presented to us as, and some people hate this term, toxic. He's unstable, his aggression is unchecked, and he only seems to have himself in mind. Her opinion seems to mean very little to him. She's almost just a thing to have, something he's collecting. At the end, you're not sorry for him. There are 2 villains in this movie if you ask me. Billy upstairs is basically kind of doing the same thing, and at the end we see he has some of his collection around him. So while Bob Clark has said he didn't intend for the movie to have political leanings, it still does. A reminder that politics is horror, and horror is politics. So many of our classic horror stories contain overt political undertones. You can agree with it or not, but at the end of the day, the movie doesn't care. One of the unique aspects of the film is that Olivia Hussey, Jess, only took this role after a psychic had told her she would make a movie in Canada, and it would make a lot of money. Spoiler alert, it didn't. For sure it found its place eventually, but that would take some time. Malcolm McDowell was originally asked to play Peter, the role that would end up going to Keir Dullea, don't know if I'm saying the name right, of 2001 A Space Odyssey fame. Bette Davis had been offered the role of house mother, but declined. Canadian Marion Waldman would end up taking the role, and quite honestly, as fun as it would have been to see Bette Davis eating up the scenery as Mrs. Mac, Marion made this her role, through and through. Gilda Radner was originally cast in the role of Phyllis, the quiet, bookish, supportive friend in the house. Saturday Night Live would interrupt those plans, and she would end up dropping out, leaving the door open for Andrea Martin, who's been in everything from SCTV to My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Then we have a pre-Superman Margot Kidder as Barb, the heavy-drinking, chain-smoking, promiscuous character of the house. She took the role because she thought Barb was wild, out of control, and unconventional. I don't want to spend too much time running through the cast. There are a lot of familiar faces here. John Saxon, anyone? But it's worth pointing out that the unsung hero of the movie, to me, is Lynn Griffin, or Claire, the first victim of the house, who we see repeatedly and who features on most of the promotional material with that bag over her head. If you're from north of the border, you'll know her from Wind at My Back, Strange Brew, and Curtains. She recently made an appearance in Thanksgiving. Kudos to you, Lynn. I would never have been able to film extended scenes with a bag over my head. That's some fortitude. Bob Clark is on record stating that John Carpenter once asked him what he would do for a sequel to Black Christmas. He said, "It would be the next year, and the guy would have actually been caught, escaped from a mental institution, go back to the house, and they would start all over again. And I would call it Halloween." Sounds familiar. Bob is also on record saying, "The truth is, John didn't copy Black Christmas. He wrote a script, directed the script, did the casting. Halloween is his horror movie, and besides, the script came to him already titled anyway." So you have to wonder, if we didn't have a Black Christmas, would we have had a Halloween? It's hard not to think of them intrinsically connected in some fashion. Two sides of the same coin. Maybe, maybe not. There are a lot of similarities to be found between the two films, so I'll leave you to decide for yourself. It's hard not to talk about Black Christmas and not mention Bob Clark's other works. Some classics, and some not-so-classics. Two of his movies would have a profound impact on just about any 80s kid. Porky's and A Christmas Story. His diverse catalog of films is impressive, even if not all of them have become classics, the way Black Christmas, Porky's, and A Christmas Story have. Clark also has the distinction of having some of the worst movies. His Baby Geniuses movies reside within the bottom 100 movies on Rotten Tomatoes. Clark was 67 when he and his son were killed by a drunk driver. His legacy can still be felt in just about every slasher movie, or Christmas-themed movie, or even teen comedy. That's quite the lasting effect. Well, thanks for watching, and if you would please smash that like or subscribe button, it'd be greatly appreciated. Next week, we'll be chatting about one of my favorite guilty pleasures, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. See you then.